From the UCLA Labor Center and KPFK, you're listening to Rework. I'm Stephanie Ritopper, and I'm here with my co-host, Saba Wahi. Hey, Saba.
Hi, Stephanie. Nice to be here with you. So Rework is the redesign of Henry Walton's legendary 19-year show, Labor Review. Each week, we bring you stories that rethink work. 2013 marks the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. Simultaneously, Dreamers, immigrant youth activists, have also been making headlines as they lead the fight for humane immigration reform. As a result of their action, immigration has become front and center in the national debate. You hear a lot about Black and brown communities not understanding each other, but the two communities have also often collaborated, converged, and worked together. So the more interesting story is that both communities are in a point in history where they are trying to envision the future.
And this raises the question, from this moment in time, from this vantage point, what is our dream for this country? What would our country really look like if it were just enough to lift up both immigrant communities and Black communities? If you've been following us for the past few weeks, you know that each week we typically bring you stories that profile someone's story from the beginning to end. In this show, we're doing things a little differently. This week will almost entirely consist of one fascinating conversation between two fierce women who are expanding, redefining, and defending this country's dream. Lola Smallwood Cuevas directs the Los Angeles Black Worker Center, and Sofia Campos is one of the national leaders of the immigrant youth movement.
We found a place in a quiet room that is part meeting space, part library, part phone banking center. The first thing I noticed was the picture of Henry Walton together with Lola at a rally. There was a feeling of both history and future in the room.
Well, I would really love to hear about actually your family history and your journeys here in the U.S.
Sure. So family history, my family is from the tobacco fields of North Carolina. We grew up in a small town called Washington, North Carolina. It was so small, it was called Lil Washington, North Carolina. And it was a place where there was a Smallwood plantation. And there are Black Smallwoods and there are white Smallwoods. My great-great-grandmother, Odelia Smallwood, was the matriarch of our family. She married Charlie Smallwood, and she was born in 1893. I know that because when we have, our families still do family reunions fairly regularly, and we go to the family gravesite and can track our ancestors there. The family, like so many families, were in the segregated South, and though it was the South, our families believed that America was a place for them. They really believed in this country and being Americans. They were very, very committed to the whole hard work ethic. They wanted to say that just because they weren't valued as human beings didn't mean they shouldn't have full participation and rights in this society, and really instilled in our family just a work ethic that said you do matter and you have to make your contribution. Our family was a farming family. As a result of that, they worked the tobacco fields, but my papa was his name. He was a farmer as a sharecropper, and raised all of his children on the farm. And the first thing that they wanted to do was get away from the farm. So part of the migration north, folks decided we're leaving Little Washington because there were no opportunities. You either worked in the field or you tried to sell pies and meat or whatever you could on the side, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity. My mother remembers growing up and going the movie theaters. You had to be in the balcony. You couldn't be in the main view. You couldn't order popcorn and have drink. You had to be up crowded in this small balcony, and you could barely hear the film, and then had to leave out the back door. So they were running away from Little Washington. And they moved north, and my grandmother was a domestic worker and then later was a piecemeal seamstress. And ended up settling in Newark, New Jersey, just across the bridge. A lot of my relatives in New York, and, worked extremely hard. So that's a little bit about the story of Lola, Miss Sofia. But I want to hear more about you and your family experience and what makes you such the wonderful person that you are.
No, yeah, when you were mentioning 1893 and Odelia, I just started tearing up. And just being able to visit like their graveyards, like you said, and remind yourself of that family history, at least as much as you can. And I can tell that's very important for you and very significant. And I was tearing up because I yearn for that, in so many ways. And I just felt my heart like tugging and wishing for that. And my grandma passed away last year during graduation weekend at UCLA. My other grandma is obviously she's really elderly and I can't really understand her through Skype, right? So just thinking about our family history and how we got here is a huge privilege, but also a huge just gap, I think, in my life. And so we came here in 1996 from Lima, Peru. My mom has Chinese background in her family and my dad has some Italian, so very different family backgrounds, very different family structures too. My mom's one of 8 and my dad's one of 3, different socioeconomic backgrounds too. Shining Path terrorism, I don't know if you've heard of Shining Path, but they were really, really huge in Peru in the 80s. It came to a close in the 90s because of the President Fujimori. And so I do remember just flashbacks, right? I have snapshots of my time in Peru. And I remember being really scared at night that my dad wouldn't be able to come home alive because there's car bombs and streetlights being bombed and all this stuff. And so because of the terrorism, there was economic turmoil, right? And so my dad lost his business, all this crazy instability, and they decided to just give it a try, pack up all of our things and come over here.
We grew up very poor, across the streets from the High Park projects. And I remember my neighbor, Mr. Charlie, would take the trash out at night and they would mug him on the way to the trash can, at night. So this is a place where there wasn't a lot of opportunity, but there was a feeling in this country that we needed to support and to make amends for what had been done wrong. And the power of the civil rights movement and the power of sort of the Black mayors movement created these opportunities that my mother was able to really take advantage of. And because of that, she worked 2 jobs. She was an LVN. She was a home care assistant at the rich folks who lived in Union, New Jersey. She would go and take care of, their elderly parents at night, and then she would go to school, and so I watched her really, really work hard to make it. And so I lived part of my life on public assistance across from the projects, and I lived part of my life the daughter of a RN professional nurse. So I got to see the difference that a quality job can do. But I also got to see the toll of poverty on the family because my mother worked so much, 18 hours a day. I didn't see her. I didn't really develop a relationship with her in a real way, as a human being, as a mother to daughter, until I was much older and she was more in a professional setting and could take the time to enjoy being a mother.
Yeah, I think similarly, my mom had to work through my elementary, middle school experience, most of my high school experience, working literally all day. My memories of my mom from those days are going to commute to Commerce with my dad to pick her up from work and bring her back. And that was it. That's my relationship with my mom back then. It was only until college where she lost her job and she had to stay home and she had to find another, she created a daycare business at home and she was able to feed me when I would come back from the 4-hour commute to UCLA and really be there for me, right? Which is a blessing in disguise in this weird backwards way. I didn't find out I was undocumented until 17. And so I hadn't really thought intensely about my roots back in Peru. I hadn't thought to ask why is it that we can't come back? Because the answer was always money. Right? So exactly a lot of the stuff that you're saying. And it made complete sense. So we don't have enough money for a car. Why would I go get a license anyway? We don't have enough money to pay the bills next month. Why am I even asking about visiting our abuelitas in Peru, right? I have blocked out a lot of memories from like elementary school and middle school and even in Peru, right? Like I have snapshots. And I feel like that's the same for elementary school, like being bullied and stuff. My mom tells me about it and how like people would make fun of my immigrant just style, I guess, 7, 8 years old, and how I would fight back. But I don't remember a lot of that, So it's just like defense mechanisms that we develop. Yeah, so I just relate to a lot of what you mentioned in similar and different ways. So it's really interesting, I think.
I had a job, but the boss man let me go. He said, I'm sorry, but I won't be needing your help no more. I said, please, Mr. Boss Man, I need this job more than you know. But he gave me my last paycheck and he sent me on out the door. Well, I need a dollar, that's what I need.
The reason why I really got involved, I would say, like, I guess a deeper reason was because I didn't want my sister to go through the same experience that I was going through, through the same struggle. So commuting from Highland Park to UCLA, like 2 hours each way, having to choose between the bus fare and eating on campus, not being paid for my jobs that I would do, right, because of my undocumented status. Just, I didn't want my little sister to go through that. And so that was a huge motivator for me to keep going and to take action and fight for the California Dream Act, to fight for the Federal Dream Act, so that my brother and sister could have a better experience than I did, and not think that college would be, endless crying and endless, and questioning your own dignity, which for me was, I think, the toughest part, has been the toughest part of my undocumented experience thus far, is coming to a point where I question my own self-worth.
Wow. I mean, I think there was a lot. I go back to like a summer camp. My mother, when she's in nursing school, she had a mentor who said, they have a summer camp and you should really send Lola. They give scholarships, and so you should look into it, and we think it'd be great for her. And so I went to this camp. It was in the Adirondacks, Camp Treetops. These are like the East Side Manhattan folks who send their kids away for like the whole summer. You're gone for the whole summer. And I went to this camp, and I remember there was some conversation that happened at one of the camp sites with one of the counselors who was a white guy, and he called me a nigger. I'm 8. He's a camp counselor. I'm from Newark too, so I was like, what? Even at that age, like I knew what that word was. And I complained, right? I complained about it, and I told everybody I could who was there what he had said. And then like it was a tense summer, right? And so after like getting off the bus, they were like, don't think Lola can come back next year. So that was my first experience with white supremacy and with white privilege and with the way in which the system can create opportunities and take opportunities, and what is their fault becomes your fault, and who has the power and who doesn't. It was really, even at that age, it also began to create like who are white people and who are black people, and how I felt about the difference.
You can't live with the world on your shoulders. I'll stay here. I'll hold you till morning. I'll hold.
If you're just tuning in, we're listening to a conversation between two powerful women who are redefining the dream for this country, Lola Smallwood Cuevas and Sofia Campos. In the early part of her career, Lola decided to venture into the world of journalism and worked as a daily beat writer for the Chicago Tribune, Long Beach Press, Telegram, and the Oakland Tribune, where she was introduced to union organizing as a member of the East Bay Newspaper Guild. There, she realized her passion was not landing a story in the paper, but working with people on the ground to make change. She became an organizer with the Security Officers Union. When she started off, she saw 4,000 security officers who began at minimum wage and then capped out after 25 years of working at just $11 an hour. After 5 years of campaigning, they moved to starting off at $11.25, complete with a career ladder and health benefits. Lola then went on to found the Black Worker Center, which is currently at the throes of a struggle to ensure that Black workers get quality jobs building the new Crenshaw Metro line in Los Angeles.
And Sofia became one of the young leaders of the National Immigrant Youth Movement. At great personal risk, she shared her own story publicly and began efforts to organize on campus and across the country. She was one of the leaders that helped to pass the California DREAM Act, which helped provide financial aid to immigrant youth students. In a series of escalating nonviolent actions, she also fought to push President Obama to stop deporting Dreamers.
There's a power dynamic and shift in the organizing. It's like fuel. It's like your tank gets so empty in the everyday life, what it means to be Black in this society, to get in your car and drive somewhere, to who are you going to deal with, like what is the conversation, this alternative world that you have to live in as a Black person, but to go into sort of an organizing world where it's really about the power of, the workers and the boss and who's going to win in this battle was for me just, I could not go in any other direction. And the outcomes, you could wait a whole year to get an article in the newspaper that you feel good about. But in a week, we had, a worker who was fired back on her job and feeding her family. And it is the vision that if we can do that on that level, like what does that look like on a larger scale? And what does that look like with the whole community and not just security officers, but other workers? And so, one of our members, said, well, that's utopian, but we can get there. It's like, yeah, it is. We're dreaming here, but that's where we're going. That's what we want. And are we willing to fight for that?
We need to dream, right? And when you're saying all those examples, like I'm thinking of us stopping deportations, right? When the government wants to separate families, like that's their mission, is just to deport people even though they're not criminals, right? And for us as immigrant youth, as immigrant families and communities to create these petitions and literally stop deportations where immigration lawyers could not and would not, that's the kind of empowerment that we need to spread, which is very contagious. But you have to overcome all that fear and all that shame and all that oppression in order to get to that place. So it's exactly that kind of feeling that gets you addicted, right? Once you actually experience it. But a lot of folks, we condition ourselves to not be open to experiencing that kind of power and love, right? Because it is a risk when you care about each other and something that much. That's why the immigrant youth movement has been able to evolve so quickly, is because we're able to share with each other this huge vulnerability. And at that instant, you create this deep bond. You're my brother and you're my sister, and I got your back because we just shared something very vulnerable, which is our undocumented status. And I know that I can stay at your home whenever, and you can stay in my home whenever, because this whole system does not have our backs, which is a privilege, a weird privilege, because if I had to do it all over again, I would choose to be undocumented again. But I think it's something that we need to spread, right? Because all of us, whether we're immigrants or not, we all have an undocumented part of our lives that we choose to hide without realizing that if we would just share it, we would be a lot stronger together, right? We would realize that we all have messed up parts of our histories. We all have things where people have just tried to mess us up. But instead, we choose to cling on to that fear and isolation. And that's what really keeps us, I think, in the shadows as a community, as a family.
Yeah, I think it's, it's the knowing your place, right? And the mainstream society wants to give us a place. This is where you belong. This is your experience, and this is who you are and what your shape is in the world.
This is your ceiling.
This is your ceiling. And, we were just talking about how tremendously hard it is to resist. And we're talking, in our experience in this country as African Americans, we're talking 400 years from not being human to being property to being Negro to being, it's just like a total onslaught to, Paula Deen, to Black Women Aren't Beautiful, to Trayvon Martin, to you don't get to vote, to you don't want to work. It is tremendously difficult to resist, to not internalize that place that people give to you. But, with civil rights, with the end of segregation, with the ability to be mobile, people began to be mobile. And so folks really buy, and this is like this whole assimilation idea, you buy into the capitalist idea that you yourself can be unto yourself your own empire. And that is true for a very small few. The rest of us really do need each other. And we need a community, and we need a government that supports us, and we need to make sure that there's an equal playing field. And so in that instance of folks buying into all of what the 80s were supposed to promise, the construct of community, the construct of organization, the construct of extended family and people living together and living in close neighborhoods, and all of that really disappeared in our community because I think there was a real belief that we were now in this political system that then was going to fight for us. So our ballot was our voice, and that was going to be our power. And a lot of the way in which we engaged community, a lot of the way in which we engaged around creating change in our communities, we went inside of these institutions.
I think that's been part of the conversation in terms of like immigration too, and just, if we do get legalization, right, citizenship, what does that mean for our movement? Because what if people just drop out, right? They think they're okay, they buy into the American dream myth. If the empowerment hasn't reached like a community level yet, how does that impact this movement, this love that we've been able to grow and at least cultivate?
We have to talk real about language. I think we have to talk real about our experiences. And I think we have to create space for problem solving. Part of the misunderstanding is so often just how do you have the conversation, particularly when your leaders are mute. I mean, Black leaders haven't talked about immigration in any way, shape, or form. There hasn't been an agenda around linking Black folks and immigrants don't talk about Black people, and they don't talk about the Black experience and the racism and the deep, consistent genocidal oppression that's been happening around Black life. And in many cases, race isn't talked about at all. It's all about status. And so I think, part of it is how do we begin, where do we begin in that conversation?
I think in addition to like the whole divide and conquer narrative, I think the healing that needs to take place. When we went to Tennessee for the training, which is mostly Black community there, one of the folks said, well, that sucks, but that's not my problem. I have enough things to worry about, which is so true, right? Like whenever you talk about your Black experience, I'm like, damn, like I can relate to it, but it's like, obviously, right, we've had our own experiences and there's a lot of individual healing that needs to take place. But I do think that there's a lot of community healing that can also take place and should be taking place. And this dialogue needs to occur. And it goes back to the theme that we've been talking, I think, this whole time about vulnerability and not just feeling safe in our own little niches, right, but coming out and extending that, I think, further. And I think that's the real power, like, I'm thinking incarceration, right, we've talked about is a huge overlap between our communities, how it's Black and brown bodies filling those beds in those jail cells. Yet why aren't we, as two communities that are obviously impacted by this prison industrial complex, talking about this in an open way, right, and being just angered by it and showing that anger, right? Like, why isn't that being talked about? It's because we're not healing together. We're not actually reflecting on the reality together. We went to a rally in East LA where it was after the Trayvon Martin case happened and all of community came out. And the theme of it, though, the message of it was not one more. But not just one more case of racial profiling, but not one more deportation, not one more LGBT person being sexually harassed or abused in the streets, right? Not one more person being bullied, not one more human being being degraded.
I've learned so much from you in your presentations, conversations. Are there things that you've learned from our relationship, from the work that we've done together, that you will take with you?
There's so much, I think, number one, beginning with the powerful woman that you are, the powerful woman that you represent, right? The lineage of women that you come from. I think that has a huge impact on me as a younger woman, a woman of color, more specifically, right? And hearing you be so articulate and so fierce and so not afraid to use real language, right? To describe our real situations, right? When you use the words genocide and plantations and oppression, like, yes, that is how we should be talking about the realities that we live in, right? But why are so many people so afraid to use that terminology? And I so appreciate you just grounding the space and grounding our communities in that reality. Your passion and your commitment and your understanding and compassion has had a huge positive impact on my life. And it's a privilege, I think, to be your friend. Like I mentioned before, when I hear you talking about your history, your experience as a Black woman too, I just think like, damn, but I also think like, man, I can relate so much. Not like it's the same at all, but just I can relate on such a deep level of just how backwards things can be. And so whenever I think about my undocumented experience, like I think about the history of this country, because this is where I have grown up. So I think about the Black history here and the slavery, and I think of that, and I connect it to my undocumented experience every time. So I also wanted to communicate that, because it makes me such a more empowered person, I think, to hear your stories and to learn about the Black history here.
Wow. I'm just honored that you would say that. It means a lot. You know, you come in contact with great people a lot in this movement. There are a lot of amazing people, but I see such greatness in you. When we had our last staff meeting and you moving to your next level and going back to school, I just, in my mind, was thinking, what an amazing warrior, refitted she's going to be coming out. What is that new arsenal she's going to have of tools to add to the fight for justice? If anyone had thought, right, immigration reform would be at this point, it really is because of your leadership and your courage and your fearlessness and the ability, I think, to tell your story in a way that I said, not only is this possible, but we have to act. And I think you've had a lot of influence on the movement. You have shown the courage to stand your ground, and your comrades to stand your ground on what is right. So I really appreciate that. And I also want to just say how much I respect your power as a woman in the way you've handled yourself in high stakes conversation, press conferences, congressional testimony, to award ceremonies at the Labor Center. Just your grace, your tremendous grace. It all just comes through, and it feels so good to see a woman who is absolutely grounded, clear. I just respect that courage, that humbleness, and that commitment so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lola and Sofia continue to fight for justice to this day.
It's time to dream on, dream on. I'm wide awake and barely breathing.
You're listening to Rework, a program of the UCLA Labor Center and KPFK. This week's show was produced by Stephanie Retopper, Saba Wahid, Obi-Wan, and Clarine Ovando Lacruz. Music supervision by Francisco Garcia Nava. Like us on Facebook at /Rework Radio. You can also tweet your reactions to the show to @UCLA Labor, or send us an email at rework@irle.ucla.edu.
Until next time, rethink, rework.
There